Both the leadership and the future of Venezuela are in deadlock. Opposition leader Juan Guaido, whom the U.S. recognizes as president, has so far been unable to oust the sitting president, Nicolas Maduro. Maduro retains support in the all-powerful Venezuelan military. The two sides were at the negotiating table earlier this month when Maduro left in protest of new U.S. sanctions. Joining me now is Ambassador Carlos Vecchio, who represents the Guaido government in Washington. Ambassador Vecchio, welcome back to the NewsHour.
Thank you for having me.
So last week, the Trump administration introduced tougher sanctions. I have to ask you, Maduro has survived previous sanctions, protests, international pressure, even internal attempts to oust him. Do you think these new sanctions will have any effect?
Absolutely. I don't have any doubt that this will put more pressure inside of the Maduro regime and will help to force Maduro for a fair negotiation to facilitate the transition in our country. So it is important to highlight that these sanctions or this executive order is targeting the Maduro regime. It's targeting the inner circle of Maduro and the people who are helping Maduro to stay in power. It's not against the Venezuelans. The second point that is important in my view, this executive order is protecting the Venezuelan assets here, to avoid the looting of our nation, to preserve those assets in favor of the Venezuela. And also, it is important to mention that this executive order allows transaction, related to food, medicines, and humanitarian aid to the Venezuelan people. So it's putting, the pressure where it should be.
At the same time, those sanctions were what forced Maduro to say enough and walk away from those talks. Those talks offered some chance for a path forward. Is that path now gone?
I mean, if you put this in context, Maduro always has used the negotiation as a way to manipulate the international community. They haven't agreed in anything on those negotiations. So the important things, in my view, is that to increase the pressure, not only internationally, internally, inside of Venezuela. We have the majority of the Venezuelans looking for a change. More than 85% of the people of Venezuela are looking for a change. We have a legitimate president in Venezuela, Juan Guaido. Juan Guaido has become the most important person and popular in Venezuela in the last 20 years without appearing in national television.
But let me ask you about those talks. Let me ask you about those talks. They are ongoing. Do you think they will lead anywhere, even though Maduro has left?
We need to force them. We need to force them. We need to conquer the power. They won't give you the power because we are dealing with a criminal state. We are dealing with a criminal organization. So that is important to keep in mind. That's why it's important to put more pressure on the Maduro regime.
Let me ask you about some of the military support that Maduro currently has. Last month, my colleague Nick Schifrin actually spoke with Maduro's former intelligence chief, that's General Figuera, who has since rather defected to the U.S. I want you to take a listen to what he told my colleague Nick Schifrin then.
Great.
Having worked firsthand with Nicolas Maduro, after telling him about all the corruption that I saw, I realized there was no will, too much evil, and too much desire for power.
Is there any way, you think, to take away some of that military support to eventually further weaken Maduro?
Well, Figuera is one example.
But he's just one.
A clear example, but they have detained 200 military officers in Venezuela. They have been detained, they have been tortured, and we have been having contacts with many middle and lower ranks of the military institution, and they are Venezuelans. They are suffering the same thing that ordinary people are suffering, and at the end of the day, they will support the people of Venezuela who are looking for a change. It is important to mention also that we cannot evaluate this as a single event. This is an ongoing process. We have been like climbing a mountain every single day, moving forward. We are very close to the peak, and I don't have any doubt that we will conquer freedom again.
Well, to that point, it's been going on for so long. The talks do continue. Are you concerned that the longer this goes on, Maduro can just run out the clock until maybe regime change as an interest goes away in the international community?
We need to keep, our determination internally and also outside of Venezuela with the coalition that we have created.
But do you think you can keep that up?
Absolutely, because when you are fighting for freedom, you never lose momentum. Freedom is there, and we will prevail. I'm fully confident because the majority of the Venezuela right now are looking for a change. In my view, we are in an irreversible process of change, and that change will come. And so I don't have any doubt, and I'm fully confident that we will prevail.
Is full regime change the only acceptable outcome? Would you accept a new election, say, in which Maduro is also allowed to
what we
stand?
want to do is resolve the political crisis which has been created by Maduro.
Could that include Maduro?
And the only way to resolve this is putting an end of the dictatorship. It's the only way to resolve it. Otherwise, the humanitarian crisis will stay in Venezuela. So we need to take Maduro out of power. We need to set a transitional government, and we need to call for a free and fair election in Venezuela. That's the agenda to resolve the political crisis in our country. And this is our proposal, and that's why we have been asking for the support of the international community.
In the meantime, I have to ask you, I have been on the border between Venezuela and Brazil. I have met some of those families who travel days without eating, carrying their children and whatever else they can. Their children, many of them have only ever lived in this state as it is right now. They're malnourished, they're going to suffer for the rest of their lives. What is your message to them the longer this takes to unfold?
Well, this is a man-made disaster, and they have forced more than 4 million Venezuelans to get out of our country looking for a better future. Maduro has created the largest refugee crisis in this continent, and if Maduro continues in power, will be the first one in the world. You know, it will be even more important than the Syria refugee crisis. So we need to stop this. My message to them is that we are looking for a change in Venezuela, that we will want to set a transitional government in Venezuela, and we would like to restore a democratic system so that we will have the condition for the returning of all Venezuelans to recover our country. That's my main message. And also we need to understand that Maduro is a threat not only against Venezuelans, it's against the entire region. And if we want to have political stability in the region, we need to conquer freedom again.
Ambassador Carlos Vecchio, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Agna.